Like Kemi, let me start by condemning the appalling terrorist attack in this city last Thursday. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families whose lives on that holy Yom Kippur morning were so wickedly torn apart. But we will also stay strong in the face of terror. We will never change our way of life because we are stronger than them. And I know everyone in this hall and beyond will renew their resolve to fight the ancient evil of anti-Semitism wherever it is found. It has no place in any civilized country, not in our United Kingdom, not ever. And if a foreign citizen expresses racial hatred, including anti-Semitism, or supports extremism or terrorism, I'll tell you this, as Home Secretary, I'll deport them. And I would like to thank the police and security services who responded so fast last week. They take risks up and down the country every day to protect us, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. Thank you. Conference, this is a historic moment. As the leader just announced, we have concluded it is right for our country to leave the ECHR. This is not a decision taken lightly. We have thought long and hard. And unlike others, we did not leap without first carefully considering all the implications. And I thank Lord Wolfson for his detailed and masterful analysis. There he is. Thank you, David. We are, of course, deeply aware of why the convention was originally written. In the aftermath of the horrors that ravaged Europe in the 1930s and 1940s, and we remain as committed as ever to protecting rights and the rule of law. But the way the courts now interpret the ECHR make it unrecognisable from the system which Winston Churchill first helped shape. And we are clear about this. The ability to control our country's borders is non-negotiable. We will not and we cannot compromise on the ability of our democratically elected parliament to set the laws that govern who comes here and who stays. Because if we can't control our borders, then we are no country at all. With no border control, we would lose our identity and we would lose our security. And this party will always protect our identity and will always protect our security. Now, the small boat crisis has brought this issue into sharp focus. The government said they would smash the gangs. Well, that is now laughable, because so far, all they've smashed are records for illegal arrivals. This year has been the worst in history. This Labour government has lost control of our borders. They are weak and they have let Britain down. The Prime Minister's latest gimmick is his one-in, one-out deal with France. Since that deal was announced, 11,000 illegal immigrants have come in and about 7 have gone out. Even Rachel Reeves, with her dubious CV, can tell that doesn't add up. And every single Channel migrant coming here is doing so illegally. They are paying people smugglers. They are departing from France, a safe country. These journeys are unnecessary. And we have seen some terrible crimes committed by migrants who came on small boats and were accommodated in hotels at our expense. Let me tell you about Abdul Rahman Abu Alayla. He is a 42-year-old Egyptian illegal immigrant who came here by small boat. He was accommodated in a Hilton hotel in Ealing at our expense. He then proceeded to brutally rape a young woman who was walking home at night in Hyde Park. She was alone and she was vulnerable. It now turns out that Abdul Rahman also has convictions in Egypt as an Islamist terrorist. In another case, a 14-year-old girl was sexually assaulted by a Channel migrant who later said, in his culture, that was acceptable behaviour. This is sick. We must do whatever it takes to end this madness. It is now clear to this new leadership that our international obligations have been stopping us from acting effectively. We experienced this in government, and the decision to leave the ECHR was reached partly as a result of that. And now, as Lord Wolfson has clearly advised, and I quote, ECHR membership places significant practical limits on the UK's ability to maintain control of our borders, and that is why we must come out, because this party is determined to control our borders. And to those who say this will make us an international pariah, where rights are casually disregarded, I say, look at Australia or Canada. They aren't in the ECHR, and they are doing very well indeed. And the UK is the land of the original Bill of Rights, the body of common law, the writ of habeas corpus, and protections in law which Parliament has passed. Our rights in this country long predate the ECHR. And to those who say we must stay in the ECHR to somehow set an example to others, I ask this: does our membership of the ECHR really make the slightest difference to the way Russia or China behaves? No, of course not. The ECHR started as a noble endeavour, but it has become twisted by judges, expanding the meaning of well-intentioned but vaguely worded clauses. Shocking examples of this abound, like a paedophile not returned to Zimbabwe in case he faces hostility there, without a single thought for the rights of children in this country to be protected. Or a drug dealer not returned to Iraq because the court said he was too westernised. Or a violent murderer not returned to Uganda because the court said mental health services in Uganda apparently are not as good as they are here. All ECHR cases. These criminals are still in the UK. They're still all posing a risk to our citizens, all thanks to the ECHR. So this madness must end. But as Lord Wolfson very wisely said, leaving the ECHR alone is not enough. We need a full plan, a complete plan, to fix Labour's borders crisis, which leaving the ECHR enables. And let me be clear about this. The Reform Party has not bothered to develop such a plan. They trumpet slogans, dreamt up in a pub, and written on the back of a fag packet, but they have not done the detailed work needed to make real change happen. Well, this party has done the work. It's called the Borders Plan, and we published it today. Enabled by the ECHR exit, we will ban all asylum and other claims by illegal immigrants. And this will mean all of those arriving illegally, including by small boat, will be immediately deported back to their country of origin if possible, or to a third country like Rwanda, if not, within a week of arrival. There we are. And the deterrent effect of that, will mean people will rapidly stop bothering to attempt the crossing in the first place. Why would you attempt the crossing if you're going to be immediately removed? It worked in Australia 12 years ago. It is working in the United States of America this year, and it will work here too. And we will also deport all foreign criminals, not some, all. There are currently about 20,000 serious foreign criminals roaming our streets who should have been deported already. They have gone on to commit between them a further 10,000 offences, including murder and rape. It still shocks me to this day that Keir Starmer and Shabana Mahmood signed a letter opposing the deportation of dangerous foreign criminals to Jamaica, one of whom later went on to commit murder here after he should have been deported. Well, we won't be signing letters like that. Instead, we will deport all those who pose a danger to the public, and that means deporting every single foreign criminal. And we will also end the legal quagmire with endless appeals and judicial reviews, made up and contradictory claims being heard, lawyers running up huge legal aid bills. I hope there are none of them here. One man claimed asylum. You won't believe this. One man claimed asylum saying he was Iraqi. And then, when that claim was rejected, he said he'd suddenly remembered that in fact he was Iranian. And the whole process started again. And then there was the notorious case of a man called Yaqub Ahmed, a Somali man who participated in the brutal gang rape of a 16-year-old girl. After his sentence in prison had finished, it took us 8 years to deport Ahmed because he made repeated asylum, human rights, and modern slavery claims. Many migrants make claims on the eve of deportation to stay here, usually very shortly after they meet a taxpayer-funded lawyer who tells them what they need to say. Judges accept all kinds of nonsensical arguments. Just last week, 8 Afghans who can't speak a single word of English were allowed into the UK from Turkey, a safe country, on tenuous human rights grounds. And some immigration tribunal judges were previously open borders campaigners. You literally couldn't make this up. So, we will abolish the immigration tribunal entirely, with decisions taken inside the Home Office. There won't be any immigration judicial review except on the narrow grounds of statutory power, and we will completely end the legal aid gravy train by abolishing it. People don't need lawyers to make their claims. They just need to tell the truth, and their claim will be fairly decided. And we will compel countries to take back their own nationals. If a country won't take back their own citizens, where they commit a crime or have no right to be here, we will simply stop issuing entry visas to nationals of those countries to come here. We will use those visa sanctions and withdraw overseas aid to countries who don't take back their own nationals. We take back ours, and they should do the same. We will also create a new removals force in the Home Office, doubling the current budget to £1.6 billion. And by stripping away all of those legal obstacles that I've described and doubling the budget, we can remove 150,000 people a year that have no legal right to be here. That is 750,000 over the course of the next Parliament. This illegal immigration scandal will end. So, conference, we have a plan. Leave the ECHR, deport all illegal immigrants immediately upon arrival and all foreign criminals. A new force to remove 150,000 people a year with no right to be here. Abolish the immigration tribunal, end judicial review and legal aid in immigration cases, and make sure countries take back their own citizens just as we do. Now, we have thought deeply about this. Our plan is radical, yes. Not because we are ideologues, but because this plan has to be radical in order to work. The old ways have been tried, and they have failed. That's why a new approach is needed. Now, we have taken our time over this, and some people have criticised us for that. But we are now the only party that has a plan which is not only radical, but will actually work in practice. So now the Conservative Party is back with the resolve to do what is needed to protect our country's borders, back with determination to ensure the laws passed by our Parliament are actually implemented, and back with a plan to end illegal immigration. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Vice President of the National Conservative Convention, Michael Winstanley.
Good afternoon, Conference. I'm delighted to introduce our first member debate of Conference 2025, and I'm delighted to be welcomed on stage by Lord Toby Young of Acton, who's a fantastic champion of free speech. Many of you will know that Toby was the founder and director of the Free Speech Union, and in that vein, we are going to allow some free speech at Conservative Party Conference. But we're not here to set party policy right now. It's an opportunity to share views, ideas and perspectives. And I think that is really important, and to get those ideas going. So before I move us on to the actual debate itself, Toby, would you just like to give us an initial comment and your thoughts and some reflections to start off with?
Yes, thank you, Michael. So I think it's unarguable that we have a free speech problem in this country. There was an article in The Times a few months ago based on FOIs that The Times had submitted to police forces I think, across the country. And it discovered that over 12,000 people are being arrested every year by the police for supposedly offensive, upsetting things they've said online. And that's an average of over 30 a day. So I don't think there can be any doubt that the police are being overzealous in their policing of social media. It's absorbing a huge amount of police time. They really should be policing our streets, not our tweets. And I'm hoping to propose an amendment to the Crime and Policing Bill in the House of Lords in the next few months, scrapping non-crime hate incidents, which I'm sure we can go on to talk about more. But Kemi Badenoch has asked me to lead a review into the laws regulating our free speech, and I'm due to report by mid-December. So it will be incredibly useful to hear what you have to say about the issue. I haven't come to any firm conclusions yet, but I can give an indication of the way I'm thinking in due course.
Brilliant, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Toby, for that and setting the scene for this debate. So we are going to make this session slightly interactive as well. There will be a Slido code that appears, because we've got a motion that we would like you to vote on. And the motion is that this House believes that freedom of speech is a fundamental pillar of democracy, and we need to create stronger protections for it in law. So if you can click on the Slido link and vote on that. You've got the hashtag code there to join, and we will see those results come through very soon. And then whilst you're just doing that, we have got a number of people that have already pre-registered for this debate, so I will ask them to come along to the microphones. They're at the front. I'll call those people as we go through. Once we've done three speakers, I'll then ask Toby to do a little bit of reflection on what the points of the speakers that have made as well, so we can do a bit of summing up as we go along. So let's move forward if we can. If that, I don't know if the results are with us. As the best laid plans of mice and men and technology. Here we go. Okay, right, okay. It was, that's interesting. It's less than I thought it was going to be. But what we're going to do, at the end of the debate, we're going to re-ask the question and to see if during the course of the debate anyone has changed their mind, if they've been persuaded, because that's what free speech is all about, listening to both sides of the argument. So without further ado, we will move into our first contributor. So have we got Cameron McPhail, please? Cameron, if you want to come to the microphone, and if you can give us your contribution in 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
Freedom of speech is the foundation of every democracy. Without it, there is no real debate, no accountability, and no way to challenge power. Yet here in Britain, free speech is increasingly under threat, not from a lack of laws, but from laws that are too broad and vague, and from a culture that seeks to silence dissent. Hate crime legislation now criminalises not just threats or incitement to violence, which of course should remain illegal, but also words deemed abusive or offensive. But offence is subjective. As Jordan Peterson has said, in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. Offence is inevitable and it's not a crime. The evidence is striking. In 2023, UK police made 12,183 arrests for online speech under laws such as Section 127 of the Communications Act 2003 and the Malicious Communications Act 1988. That's around 33 arrests per day. By comparison, Russia recorded roughly 9,314 arrests for online speech in the same year, or on a per capita basis, Britain's arrest rate is higher. But this isn't just a theory. At the University of Aberdeen, where I chair the Conservative Society, we faced backlash from student groups and the campus paper for criticising the students' president's comments on immigration. We weren't abusive, we weren't threatening, we simply disagreed. Yet even on campus, the instinct was to silence us, not debate us. Consider also the case of Darren Grimes, investigated simply for interviewing historian David Starkey. Starkey himself has said, freedom of speech wasn't won by being nice, it has been won by struggle with religion. Policing offence drives ideas underground instead of challenging them. Conference, let us be honest. The state cannot be the arbiter of truth, nor the police the guardians of offence. If democracy is to survive, we must be prepared to amend hate crime laws that criminalise offence, protect robust debate, and defend the right to speak freely, even when it shocks, irritates, or provokes. Because without freedom, democracy itself withers. Thank you.
Cameron, thank you very much for getting us off to a strong start. Thank you very much indeed. I'll now call on upon our second contributor, which is William Moses. William, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, my Lord. This House discusses freedom of speech, ostensibly protected by New Labour's Human Rights Act 1998, which similarly covers freedom of expression. Or does it? Only last year, the fine line was tread of what is and is not permissible by the passage of abortion clinic buffer zone prohibitions at both UK and devolved levels. Article 10 of this Act provides that restrictions are necessary in a democratic society in the interests of the protection of health or morals. Note the word or. It sounds like a binary choice. Therein lies the contradiction. Those who would deem abortion morally wrong are no longer permitted a freedom of expression by the Act in favour of those seeking a morally contentious health procedure. The Act contains very loose, undefined caveats, resulting in subsequent legislation diminishing the very purpose and function of the Act itself. The effect is now seen in Glasgow, where polite, sincere, elderly grandmothers are criminalised despite not approaching anyone, simply for being close to a clinic, silently observing their own deeply held moral belief. Another example that you alluded to, my Lord, was police knocking on doors for hurty words on Facebook. It's ridiculous. What societal outcome does this achieve? What does this tell the world about our approach to freedoms? Are such caveats a constitutional risk in view of the often deliberately antagonistic approach taken by devolved assemblies? Does this House recognise the top of a slippery slope when it sees one? Thank you.
William, thank you very much indeed for that. That was great. Okay, and I'll call upon our third contributor, Zach Wagman. Zach? Is Zach in the audience? Right. I will move on to Patrice Marriott, if Patrice is here. Right. No? Okay.
Shall I respond to those
Yes, please,
comments?
Toby.
Yeah.
Yes, that'd be great.
Yeah, I was sorry to hear, Cameron, about the difficulties the Conservative societies faced at the University of Aberdeen. One of the things the Free Speech Union campaigned for in the last Parliament was the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act, which creates more robust protections for free speech and academic freedom on campus. And it received royal assent in 2023. But one of the first things Bridget Phillipson, the new Education Secretary, did when she got her feet under the desk was to pause the implementation of the Act. So the most important clauses weren't activated. And the Free Speech Union challenged that decision with a judicial review. And a week before that judicial review was due to be heard in the High Court, she did a partial U-turn. But I'm already hearing from friends at universities that the implementation of most of the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act is already making a visible difference on campuses, but unfortunately only on English university campuses. It doesn't apply to Wales, Scotland, or Northern Ireland, and I think what we need to do is to make sure the rest of HEFSA is commenced, and we see similar legislation in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland to protect people like you from being silenced by people who may disagree with your point of view, claim it's offensive, but have no right to veto you. We need to see those protections in other places, not just in English universities. And just a quick response to William's point. I agree. Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights isn't a robust enough clause to protect freedom of speech and expression. It's a pale shadow of the First Amendment in the United States. And if we do come out of the EHRC and repeal the Human Rights Act, I would like to see the next government, the next Conservative government, introduce a free speech bill which introduced much more robust protections for freedom of speech and expression than are currently provided by Article 10.
Great, thank you very much for that, Toby, and that reflection on those two contributions. Thank you. Have we got Jonathan Hulley in the audience, please? Jonathan, thank you.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Actually, what the Lord has just said is actually what I was going to say, and therefore I'm not going to make a speech contribution this afternoon, but I'd like to thank the Lord for those positive comments which I support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Ben Lavender. Ben? Oh, marvellous. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So my contribution is more of a policy proposal, because I think currently the protections around free speech in employment, you hear examples of someone who has said something on their private, personal, online account, who then has been sacked due to public uproar, despite there being no explicit link on their online account to their place of employment. So the argument that it reflects badly on the employer, I don't buy it, because there's no link. Someone has gone out to find that information to purposely cause trouble. And another important aspect, I welcome the comments made about the universities, what's already been done there with free speech. But I think that should be expanded to sixth form colleges as well, because you do hear occasional examples where students, again, on personal online accounts with no link to their place of education have been, have been reprimanded by their teachers or the school for comments they've made online in a private capacity. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you very much for that, Ben. I was just thinking, Toby, would you just want to give some reflection on that particular
Yes,
point?
sure. So, Ben, what I'm about to say, I should make clear, is certainly not Conservative Party policy, although it could conceivably be part of the recommendations I make when I produce my provisional report in mid-December about how I think the laws regulating free speech in this country need to be either amended or repealed. But one thing the Free Speech Union has been campaigning for is an amendment to the Employment Rights Act, which would make it unlawful for companies to discipline, fire, penalise employees for things they've said online, unless, first of all, they're less than a year old. So there's a 1-year statute of limitations on what the offence archaeologists can dig into to try and find reasons to cancel you. So a 1-year statute of limitations. And in addition, the company would have to show, the employer would have to show that the comment in question has caused tangible harm to the company. I think the concept of reputational harm is a bit too nebulous. And as you say, that can easily be weaponized by activists who can say, I'm going to withdraw my custom now from your company because this particular person said they were opposed to mass uncontrolled immigration and I fundamentally disapprove of that point of view, so I'm going to withdraw my custom unless you fire them. That kind of pile-on has proved to be quite effective because it effectively weaponizes the reputational clauses in companies' social media policies. So I think for a company to justifiably discipline an employee, or worse, for something they've said on social media, they're going to have to show not just that it was said in the last 12 months, but that it caused the company tangible harm. And if they can't show that, then I think the employee should be protected.
That's really important, that, and that's a really good point that you make there, Toby. I'm sure that will come as great comfort to a lot of people who feel very vulnerable in this day and age. So let's see where we go with that one. Great, thank you. Right, okay, so I'd like to call Jonathan Schrago. Apologies if I've mispronounced it, Jonathan.
Schrago, it's close enough, thank you. So since Thursday, I've been hearing a lot about what Jews want and need. So they want to be safe, and they want to be free to practice their religion. And they don't want to be attacked, which is probably fair enough. They don't want to hear that that they control the media. And they don't want to hear that they're the reason why we went to war with Iraq. I don't want to hear that the Holocaust wasn't actually as bad as we were taught in schools. I don't want to hear that we're using mass migration to replace white people. And I don't want to have to explain for the umpteenth time in the last year and a half that the Protocols of the Elders of Zion doesn't explain everything that's happening in the world today. I don't want to hear about Frankists and Jewish pedophile rings or Loxism. And I really don't want to hear about Jeffrey Epstein and his links to Mossad. I am done with this. Except I don't really have much of a choice, because everywhere I look, in the mutterings of people I thought I knew, and every forum and subreddit and social media account online, I see it. So I've got to ask, is this what free speech is? This is the price that we get to pay for it? I'm hearing a lot of talk also, and I saw this on the news earlier today, an interview about how we must crack down on anti-Semitism. And I get the instinct, I genuinely do, but the thing is that this isn't the cost of free speech. This is the cost of entry. Because when you hear a bad idea, you don't remove it by banning it, you remove it by challenging it. You have to rely that your opinion is superior when put up against theirs. You have to trust that either you have a superior idea, or if not, you adopt the better one, no matter how unsavory it might sound. Because if we pay this price, we get the product of free speech, and that is freedom and security. It's a price that I, as a Jew, am willing to pay, even if things like Thursday perhaps happen again in the future. I'm still willing to pay it, because it buys a product that we all need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you. Can I move on to our next contributor, please, which is Da Vinci Warmington? No, Da Vinci Warmington? Or Luke O'Hara? Is Luke O'Hara in the room? If not, I'll ask Toby just to respond
to Jonathan.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I sympathise, Jonathan, with your frustration. And while I'm not going to resile on my commitment to free speech, I think it's worth bearing in mind that we do have, I think, a degree of two-tier policing and a two-tier approach by the Crown Prosecution Service to the policing and prosecution of anti-Semitic comments which are clearly unlawful. And I know from the work we do at the Free Speech Union that supposedly Islamophobic remarks on X or Facebook are much more likely to result in a knock on the door from the local police than anti-Semitic remarks. And there was one famous example from our case files, a man called Julian Fuchs, an ex-special constable in Kent, got into an online spat with a pro-Palestinian poster and said nothing remotely approaching anything unlawful, just robustly stood up for Israel and Israel's right to exist. And his house was raided by, I think, 6 police officers, ignoring the fact that he was an ex-special constable. He was arrested, handcuffed, taken to a police station, had his DNA taken, fingerprints, was, I think, held in a cell for more than 6 hours, interviewed, and only allowed to leave when he'd agreed to accept a caution. I mean, absolutely shocking. And we helped him sue Kent Police for wrongful arrest and false imprisonment, and they settled for £20,000, and the chief constable apologised to him. So I think the issue isn't so much that our existing laws permit too much rampant, toxic anti-Semitism. It's that when we see that, and when it's clearly unlawful, the authorities are turning a blind eye to it. And I would say that one of the arguments I hear for the current government's plan for rolling out an official state-approved definition of Islamophobia and encouraging public bodies to embed it in workplace speech codes and discipline people for falling foul of this new definition. One of the arguments for it is supposedly that it will reduce anti-Muslim incidents, anti-Muslim hate crime. But there doesn't seem much evidence that the rollout of the IHRA's definition of anti-Semitism has had any positive impact in reducing the extent of anti-Semitism. So I don't think prohibition, increasing the prohibition on what people can say, is the way to go. But I certainly sympathise with your frustration.
It's not on.
Oh,
It is on.
go on.
I don't want any knocks on the door. Say what you like about me. I'm perfectly happy to hear it.
Right. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Toby, for that summing up. Okay, we'll move on to our final 2 contributors. It's Gilherme Leal. Brilliant. Thank you.
Hi there. How can I say this? I do not question the doubt of freedom of speech, but however, what I am questioning about is how does freedom of speech contribute the common man or the common person? In many countries, in many places of the world, we are lacking behind compared to them. For example, in places like China, where freedom of speech is limited or very minimum, they are subsequently much more richer or much more economically prosperity compared to us in the UK. We are lacking behind in countries of those types of where mass production and mass industrialization and mass are taking more contribution than the freedom of the people, and it seems like it's working more than we can realize. And speaking of which, in the UK, I don't know if Sir has seen, there was a report that came out that said that countries like Russia, that they say that freedom of speech is minimum, they say that only 1,500 people were arrested for their political opinions or for their opinions online. However, in the UK, it was around more than 3,000 per year. And I was wondering, are we really that free, or is our freedom minimum and that causes our economic growth compared to other countries like China? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that contribution. Which brings us on to our final contributor this afternoon, which is Hannah Edward. Hannah, are you in the room? Oh,
Helen
Hannah, brilliant.
Edward.
Oh, sorry, sorry, not got my proper reading glasses on. Apologies.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yes, so I had the privilege of standing against Ed Davey in the last election, and he is well known for his beliefs that a man can be a woman, and for that reason on its own is enough to get me very interested in the conversation about free speech. But I wanted to speak for another reason, and that is because, Lord Young, I was at your fantastic event last night, which was about the war on science. And we had an amazing panel there, including Richard Dawkins, who started with a story about famine and hunger in the 1940s under Stalin, influenced by Marxist ideology and the agricultural minister, which resulted in 45 million deaths. And for that reason, we need to be very aware of the dangers of ideology encroaching on science. And so our debate yesterday was really very much about the danger of ideology in science and the importance of being able to do research and be able to establish without hurting the sensitivities of people. And we talked about also decolonizing maths, and the point was made that maths is a universal language and that will be there long after we've gone and even if we're on another planet. And the dangers of ideology in politics are around particularly children, and I feel very angry about the influence on children, but also the indoctrination on campus for students, but careers of professionals and professors, and the restrictions around free inquiry. So on all of those topics, my call to action following yesterday's fantastic event, Lord Young, is to keep academia free from ideology.
Thank you very much. Toby, would you like to respond to those two contributions we've just had?
So, the first contributor, I don't think China is a great example of a country which has made a trade-off between various liberties and economic prosperity. I don't think that it needed to restrict people's liberties in order to achieve what it has achieved. In fact, part of becoming a more prosperous, economically successful country has involved granting more freedoms to its population. I think a better example is probably Singapore. I was in Singapore a couple of weeks ago, and I've just written about it in The Spectator and fleshed it out in the Daily Skeptic, my news publishing site. Just published it this afternoon, wrote it on the train on the way here. I think Singapore does pose a challenge. It's a fairly authoritarian regime. There is some freedom of expression, but nothing like as much as there is here. It's to all intents and purposes a one-party state. As you know, antisocial behaviour in Singapore can be punished quite severely, and that includes spitting, it includes chewing gum, littering. So it's very unlike here. It's a different model. It's a very centralised, technocratic model. There isn't a flourishing civil society, no freedom of the press, and yet economically it's been just phenomenally successful. A swamp transformed into an Asian tiger. I think the conclusion I reach in this article is that the problem with that model, one-party state, central planning, not many civil liberties, is that it can work with a wise and virtuous leader. This was Aristotle, when he ranked different regimes, different systems of government, put a wise and virtuous monarch at the top, and democracy is only about halfway down. But Aristotle pointed out that the risk of a monarchy, an absolute monarchy, is that it can very easily descend into despotism. And I think the risk with Singapore is that, yes, it's been very successful, and we haven't seen that authoritarian system abused by a despot. In fact, the Prime Minister of Singapore for 31 years was a political genius and had a really clear-sighted understanding of human nature and was committed to economic growth. He was an out-and-out capitalist. But it could fall into the wrong hands and descend into despotism. As Churchill said about democracy, it's the least worst, it's the least bad form of government because the risk of it devolving into something much less attractive is pretty slight. Thank you for praising the Free Speech Union event last night at the Emmanuel Centre. Yeah, I think quite a few of the panelists were extremely eloquent about the risk of the ideological capture of science, and the most eye-catching example was the one given by Richard Dawkins, Lysenkoism resulting in famines, not just in the Soviet Union, but also in China. And as you say, the ideological capture of science has meant that gender identity ideology is pretty pervasive, not just in schools and universities, but also in the NHS. And curiously, about 40% of the 4,500 plus people we've helped at the Free Speech Union in the 5 or so years we've existed, 40% of them would describe themselves as gender-critical feminists, sex realists, women who don't want to share changing rooms, bathrooms, toilets with biological men and don't think biological men should be able to compete against women in women's sports. That, for many years, has been heresy, particularly in the public sector, particularly in education. I think we're beginning to win that fight. We're not quite Turf Island, but I think the Supreme Court judgment was very helpful. And in almost every case that we've taken up the cudgels on behalf of a woman who has been disciplined or lost her job because she'd stood up for sex-based women's rights, we've been successful. So I think we're winning that fight, but it's another good example. I think the final example I'd give is the ideological capture of climate science, saddling us with economically ruinous energy policies for decades. And I was delighted when Kemi said that she intends to repeal the Climate Change Act. That's been a long time coming. And I think it's been very difficult because of the ideological rigidity of the people promoting the climate change agenda to challenge that agenda. You often hear it's settled science. They roll out the canard that 97% of scientists believe in man-made global warming. Anyone who disputes it is a climate denier. I think that may be an effective way, that dogmatic way of silencing criticism, that no debate strategy, which we've also seen amongst trans rights activists. It's an effective short-term strategy, but in the long term, it's ineffective. It doesn't work. You need to bring the public with you, and if you're not willing to engage in debate with your critics in the public square, you can only get so far by demonizing those critics as transphobes or bigots or climate deniers. In the end, you're going to lose the argument, which I think we're seeing happening in the gender and sex-based space, and we're also seeing it happening in the climate space too, which is all to the good.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Toby. And thank you for everyone that's made a contribution this afternoon. We've covered a lot of ground, I think, in terms of the free speech debate. So just before we conclude the session, Toby, I wonder if you'd just mind giving us your final thoughts and reflections on what we've heard today, and any calls to action or anything where you see this debate going.
Well, I think I've been encouraged by the contributions, some incredibly thoughtful, eloquent contributions from the floor. I think free speech is becoming a more and more important issue. You often hear it's a secondary issue, not something that the Conservatives should be campaigning on, but I think it's becoming an increasingly important issue. partly because we're seeing so many attacks on free speech. Not a day passes without a video appearing on X or Facebook of someone having their collar felt because of something they've said on social media, which 99 times out of 100 isn't remotely unlawful. Unlike in other authoritarian countries, the compensating thing about Singapore is, well, yes, you don't enjoy the same freedoms that you do here, but everything works. Here, we seem to be descending into a kind of dysfunctional authoritarianism. It's not so much the Stasi as the Keystone Cops who are responsible for kind of policing social media. It's increasingly feeling like a country in which nothing works. So where's the trade-off for our freedoms being taken away if nothing works as well? I think we should be campaigning to strengthen our free speech protections. Free speech is incredibly important. It's how we hold people in power accountable. It's how we correct policy errors. It's how we make progress in science. And without it, I think we will inevitably descend into a more and more dysfunctional, authoritarian society. So I hope you'll join me in standing up for, campaigning for stronger free speech protections, take advantage of the opportunities withdrawing from the EHRC and repealing the Human Rights Acts presents us with, and I hope you will in due course support my call for something like a British First Amendment, which I think we need in this country. That is the gold standard. They inherited that tradition from us in the United States. We need to learn those lessons and introduce something like the First Amendment into this country.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Toby. So just before I sort of like conclude this session, we did say that we would revisit the vote. So hopefully the Slido QR code will be there. It's the same one as before. So if you can start to vote, it's looking pretty healthy so far. And it's going in the right direction, I think. We're on 94%. So I think last couple of seconds for people to vote. Moved up to 95%. This is what we like to see. Excellent. Right, I think we are there. So I think we're seeing a shift in the audience's mind, which is always good to see. So could I, as just part of my final remarks, just to say a massive thank you to all the people that have contributed to the debate: Cameron, William, Ben, Jonathan, Gilherm and Helen. Thank you very much for those massive, really thoughtful contributions. This has been one of the sort of like best debates that I've heard in a long time, and in terms of a party conference, and one of the reasons why we wanted to bring them back. But could I also say a massive thank you to you, Toby, as well, for giving up your time, but also for those incredible, insightful reflections and responses to the debate as well.
Thank you.
We're extremely fortunate to have you in the House of Lords. It provides me, and I know a lot of other people, some reassurance that we've got a good Conservative in there who's standing up for freedom of speech and standing up for our beliefs and our principles. So thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of conference, and I'm sure I'll see you at one or two receptions later on. So thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.